one that aides tried to dismiss and insiders refused to discuss publicly. But when Queen Camilla emerged looking visibly strained after a private meeting with senior advisors, speculation exploded. Something had changed. Something serious. And for the first time, the palace could no longer contain the growing concern surrounding King Charles's health battle. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For weeks, whispers had been moving through royal circles like an approaching storm. At first, they were easy to ignore. The monarchy had faced rumors before, and palace officials had become experts at calming public concern. Yet this time felt different. Behind the carefully managed schedules and reassuring public appearances, there was an unmistakable sense that something significant was unfolding. Those closest to the king appeared increasingly cautious. Meetings were being held without notice. Long-standing routines were suddenly changing. Even seasoned royal observers began noticing unusual patterns that could not easily be explained away. The turning point reportedly came during a private emergency meeting involving Queen Camilla, senior palace aides, and a group of royal physicians. Official details remained tightly guarded, but the level of secrecy surrounding the gathering immediately raised questions. Sources familiar with royal operations suggested that discussions extended far longer than expected. Advisors who normally appeared relaxed and composed were reportedly seen moving through palace corridors with unusual urgency. No statements were issued. No clarifications were offered. Instead, silence became the preferred strategy, and that silence only fueled greater speculation. Inside both Clarence House and Buckingham Palace, activity appeared to intensify. Staff members who typically handled routine matters were suddenly excluded from conversations. Certain schedules were adjusted without explanation. Trusted aides reportedly received instructions to avoid discussing the king's condition under any circumstances. Such caution was remarkable even by royals. The monarchy has always valued privacy, but insiders quietly admitted that the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. There was a growing awareness that whatever was being discussed behind closed doors carried consequences far beyond a simple medical update. What drew even greater attention was Queen Camilla herself. Throughout the years, she had developed a reputation for maintaining composure during difficult moments. Public pressure rarely seemed to affect her. Yet during a scheduled engagement shortly after the reported meeting, observers noticed something different. Her usual confidence appeared strained. Her remarks were shorter. Her demeanor seemed weighed down by concerns she could not openly discuss. While no official explanation was offered, many began wondering whether the burden she carried was connected to the king's ongoing health battle. At the same time, questions surrounding King Charles grew louder. Although he continued fulfilling selected duties, many royal watchers believed subtle changes had become increasingly difficult to ignore. His appearances seemed more carefully managed. Engagements were sometimes shortened. Public schedules appeared less demanding than they had been only months earlier. None of these developments confirmed anything on their own, yet together they created a picture that many found impossible to dismiss. Palace insiders who had remained silent for weeks began quietly acknowledging that concerns had been building behind the scenes for some time. As rumors spread, the palace found itself trapped in an increasingly difficult position. Remaining silent encouraged speculation. Speaking openly risked creating even greater alarm. Every passing day intensified public curiosity. Every unanswered question generated new theories. And at the center of it all stood Queen Camilla, facing mounting pressure from both inside and outside royal circles. Whether she wanted the role or not, she was rapidly becoming the figure expected to address the growing concerns surrounding the king's condition. The responsibility was enormous, the scrutiny relentless, and the stakes unlike anything she had faced before. But the alarming developments unfolding behind closed doors were only the latest chapter in a battle that had been quietly intensifying for months. For months, the public saw carefully managed appearances, reassuring smiles and confident statements. Yet behind the grand gates of the monarchy, a very different reality was beginning to emerge, one filled with difficult treatments, private consultations, and growing uncertainty about the king's future. The concern that had quietly surrounded the emergency meetings and unusual secrecy inside royal circles did not appear overnight. According to those closely following developments within the monarchy, King Charles had been engaged in a demanding health battle for far longer than many members of the public realized. While official updates often emphasized resilience and determination, the reality behind those carefully crafted messages was reportedly far more complicated. Every appearance required planning. Every commitment demanded consideration. Every public engagement became part of a delicate balancing act between preserving normality and confronting an increasingly difficult situation. Throughout this period, the palace worked tirelessly to maintain public confidence. The monarchy understood the importance of stability, especially during moments of uncertainty. Reassuring statements were issued whenever concern began to grow. Public schedules continued wherever possible. Advisors remained determined to project continuity, hoping to prevent anxiety from spreading beyond palace walls. Yet even the most disciplined institutions face limits. The challenge was not simply managing public perception. It was confronting the reality that the king's health journey was becoming more demanding with each passing month. Behind closed doors, extensive consultations reportedly became a regular part of royal life. Medical specialists, trusted advisors, and senior household officials were increasingly involved in discussions surrounding treatment plans and future responsibilities. The king's schedule was no longer built solely around royal duties. It had to accommodate medical appointments, recovery periods, and careful assessments regarding what he could realistically undertake. While none of this was openly discussed in detail, insiders suggested that every decision carried weight. The goal was always the same: protect the king while preserving the institution he had spent a lifetime preparing to lead. As those consultations intensified, members of the royal family quietly began adjusting their own roles. Prince William appeared to shoulder a growing number of responsibilities. Princess Catherine continued supporting major engagements while maintaining stability within her own family. Princess Anne remained a steady and dependable presence, often stepping forward whenever additional support was required. None of these changes were announced as dramatic shifts. Instead, they unfolded gradually, almost invisibly, creating the impression that the monarchy was adapting naturally. Yet those paying close attention understood that these adjustments reflected something much deeper. Meanwhile, concern reportedly spread among palace staff. Employees who had served through decades of royal history understood the significance of even the smallest changes. They noticed schedules becoming more flexible. They observed greater caution surrounding long-term planning. Conversations that once focused on future initiatives increasingly centered on immediate priorities. While loyalty prevented many from speaking publicly, there was a growing awareness that the king's battle was affecting nearly every aspect of palace operations. The most troubling development was the growing realization that maintaining the king's traditional workload was becoming increasingly difficult. For years, Charles had been known for his relentless dedication. His schedule was often packed with engagements, meetings, charitable work, and official duties. But health challenges have a way of changing even the strongest routines. Reports suggested that more careful decisions were being made about where his energy was spent. Certain commitments were shortened. Others were postponed altogether. The adjustments appeared subtle from the outside, yet inside royal circles they carried enormous significance. What made the situation especially emotional was the contrast between the king's determination and the growing demands placed upon him. Those closest to him reportedly admired his refusal to step back. Even when circumstances suggested caution, he remained committed to duty. He remained focused on service. Yet determination alone could not erase the realities of an ongoing health battle. And as concern deepened behind palace walls, family members found themselves facing difficult questions about the future, responsibility, and the enormous burden that comes with protecting the crown during a period of uncertainty. As the king's health demands grew heavier, those closest to him found themselves carrying an ever greater burden. While headlines focused on the king, another story was unfolding largely out of sight. Queen Camilla was suddenly forced into a role she never expected, balancing royal duty while confronting the emotional reality of watching her husband fight an increasingly difficult battle. As concerns surrounding King Charles continued to grow, the spotlight remained fixed on his condition, his treatments, and the future of the monarchy. Yet behind those discussions, another struggle was quietly taking shape. It was a struggle that carried no official title, appeared in no palace statement, and unfolded far from public attention. For Queen Camilla, the king's health battle was not simply a constitutional concern or a national conversation. It was deeply personal. Every medical update, every consultation, and every difficult decision carried an emotional weight that few outside her inner circle could fully understand. What made the situation even more challenging was the sudden expansion of her responsibilities. As Charles faced increasing demands from treatment and recovery, many of the duties that once rested comfortably across two shoulders began shifting onto one. Royal engagements still required attention. Public expectations remained unchanged. The institution continued moving forward, regardless of the private challenges affecting those at its center. Camilla found herself standing between two worlds: the public world that demanded confidence and stability, and the private reality filled with uncertainty and concern. Those who observed her closely during this period reportedly noticed subtle changes. She continued performing her duties with determination, but there were moments when the strain seemed impossible to hide completely. The burden she carried was unlike anything she had experienced before. Supporting a monarch through a health crisis required strength. Supporting a husband through the same battle required something even greater. The emotional demands of both roles often collided, creating a pressure that few could have anticipated. Despite these challenges, Camilla reportedly remained focused on maintaining stability around Charles. Friends and advisors understood the importance of protecting him from unnecessary stress. Every effort was made to preserve normality wherever possible. Public schedules were managed carefully. Family discussions became increasingly important. Advisors worked tirelessly to ensure that the king's recovery remained the priority. Yet maintaining that balance was becoming harder with every passing week. The more serious the concerns became, the more difficult it was to separate duty from emotion. At the same time, royal commitments continued piling up. The monarchy does not pause during moments of personal hardship. Ceremonies still take place. Official obligations continue. Public expectations remain constant. For Camilla, this created a difficult reality. She was expected to represent strength during a period when uncertainty seemed to surround every conversation. She was expected to reassure others while quietly wrestling with her own fears. It was a burden that demanded resilience on a remarkable level. According to those familiar with royal circles, concerns were increasingly being shared among trusted friends and senior advisors. Conversations that once focused on schedules and appearances reportedly shifted toward deeper questions about endurance, responsibility, and the future. Those closest to Camilla understood that the emotional toll was growing. While she remained committed to supporting Charles, they also recognized the enormous pressure she faced behind closed doors. Every new development carried consequences. Every setback created fresh worries. Perhaps the most striking contrast was the difference between what the public saw and what may have existed beneath the surface. Publicly, Camilla continued presenting composure. She fulfilled her obligations. She offered reassuring words whenever appropriate. She projected confidence during moments when confidence was needed most. Privately, however, those same circumstances reportedly generated profound concern. The stronger she appeared in public, the greater the effort required behind the scenes. It was a delicate balancing act, one that became more difficult as the king's battle continued to unfold. Yet even as Camilla tried to project strength, events inside the royal family were beginning to raise even more troubling questions. As uncertainty deepened, senior royals quietly began making adjustments that many observers initially overlooked. But when viewed together, these changes suggested something far more significant may have been taking place behind the scenes. The growing concerns surrounding King Charles's health were no longer confined to private meetings, medical consultations, or whispered conversations among palace insiders. A new pattern was beginning to emerge, one that careful royal observers found increasingly difficult to ignore. Individually, each development appeared routine. Together, however, they painted a far more revealing picture. As uncertainty continued to surround the king's condition, senior members of the royal family seemed to be preparing for possibilities that few were willing to discuss openly. At the center of these changes stood William. For years, he had steadily prepared for the responsibilities that come with being heir to the throne. Yet recent months appeared different. The scope of his involvement seemed to expand noticeably. Engagements that might once have been handled elsewhere increasingly fell under his direction. His presence became more prominent during major royal occasions. Decisions requiring leadership and stability often appeared to gravitate toward him. While no official announcement accompanied these developments, many interpreted them as signs that William was being called upon to shoulder a greater share of responsibility during a period of growing uncertainty. At the same time, Catherine's role within the monarchy appeared to be evolving as well. Already one of the most admired figures within the royal family, she seemed to be taking on an even greater presence during important events. Her appearances carried added significance. Her responsibilities appeared broader. The confidence with which she handled increasingly visible duties suggested careful preparation for whatever challenges might lie ahead. Those observing the royal family closely began noticing that Catherine was no longer simply supporting the institution. She appeared to be helping steady it. Meanwhile, Princess Anne continued to serve as one of the monarchy's most dependable pillars. During times of uncertainty, her reputation for discipline and unwavering commitment became especially valuable. She remained a reassuring presence within the family, offering experience, stability, and perspective. While others faced growing public scrutiny, Anne quietly continued fulfilling her duties with the same determination that had defined decades of service. Her steady involvement reassured many that, regardless of the challenges unfolding behind palace walls, there remained figures within the institution capable of navigating difficult waters. Yet perhaps the most intriguing developments were the ones that remained almost entirely hidden from public view. Reports began emerging of internal discussions focused on future planning. Such conversations are not unusual within royal circles. The monarchy has always prepared for multiple scenarios. However, the timing of these discussions attracted attention. As concerns surrounding the king's health intensified, questions naturally arose about the nature of those private conversations. What possibilities were being considered? What preparations were quietly underway? And how serious had the situation become behind closed doors? Adding to the speculation were subtle but noticeable scheduling adjustments. Certain engagements were reorganized. Responsibilities were redistributed. Long-term plans appeared subject to increased review. None of these changes confirmed anything on their own. Yet, taken together, they created a growing sense that contingency planning was becoming more than a routine exercise. The institution appeared to be examining possibilities that many hoped would never become necessary. What made these developments especially significant was the atmosphere surrounding them. There was no panic. There were no dramatic announcements. Instead, there was careful preparation, quiet coordination, deliberate adjustments made by individuals who understood the enormous responsibility of protecting the monarchy during a period of uncertainty. Yet the very existence of those preparations inevitably fueled new concerns. If senior royals were making these changes now, what were they anticipating? What information existed behind closed doors that remained hidden from public view? As these questions continued multiplying, the mood within royal circles reportedly became increasingly tense. Concern was no longer limited to speculation surrounding the king's condition. Attention was beginning to shift toward what might come next. And just as those fears began gaining momentum, an unexpected development emerged that would send anxiety through palace corridors and raise even deeper questions about the future. And then came a development that transformed concern into genuine alarm among palace insiders. The atmosphere inside royal circles shifted dramatically after reports emerged of a new development in the king's condition. Suddenly, conversations that had once been dismissed as speculation became impossible to ignore. The quiet concern that had been building for months now seemed to take on a far greater urgency. What had once existed as whispered discussions among insiders was rapidly becoming the central focus of conversations throughout royal circles. Reports began circulating that a significant medical update had been delivered regarding King Charles's ongoing health battle. No official details were immediately released, and the palace remained cautious in its public messaging. Yet the reaction behind closed doors suggested that this was not a routine development. Something had changed. Something important enough to alter the mood within the institution itself. According to those following events closely, the reported update triggered a wave of activity unlike anything seen in recent months. Specialists were allegedly consulted at short notice. Senior advisors found themselves involved in discussions that stretched far beyond ordinary planning meetings. What made the situation especially troubling was not simply the existence of those consultations, but the speed with which they appeared to unfold. Decisions that might normally take weeks seemed to require immediate attention. Questions that had once been theoretical suddenly felt much more urgent. As news of the development spread through inner royal circles, efforts to protect privacy intensified. Security measures reportedly became more noticeable. Access to certain discussions grew increasingly restricted. Information was shared only among a small group of trusted individuals. The monarchy has always valued discretion, particularly during sensitive periods, but many observers believe the level of caution now being exercised reflected a deeper concern. The atmosphere was no longer defined by uncertainty alone. It was increasingly shaped by the possibility that events were moving faster than anyone had anticipated. At the same time, palace officials faced a challenge that seemed almost impossible to manage. Public curiosity had reached extraordinary levels. Every appearance, every schedule adjustment, and every official statement was being examined for hidden meaning. Advisors reportedly worked tirelessly to control the flow of information, hoping to prevent speculation from overwhelming reality. Yet the more carefully information was managed, the more questions emerged. Rumors multiplied. Interpretations varied. And with each passing day, the gap between what was known and what was suspected appeared to grow wider. For those closest to King Charles, however, the situation was far more personal than any public debate. Reports suggested that the latest developments triggered deep emotional reactions among family members and trusted confidants. The uncertainty that had lingered for months was now accompanied by a growing awareness that the stakes could be far greater than previously imagined. Individuals who had remained composed throughout earlier stages of the king's battle reportedly found themselves confronting difficult emotions. Hope remained, determination remained, but so too did concern. Queen Camilla, already carrying enormous responsibilities, reportedly felt the weight of these developments more heavily than most. Every new update brought fresh questions. Every consultation carried new possibilities. Her efforts to maintain stability became increasingly difficult as the emotional burden continued to grow. Meanwhile, Prince William, Catherine, Princess Anne, and other senior royals reportedly remained focused on supporting both the king and the institution during a period of mounting uncertainty. Outside palace walls, public concern was reaching a new level. Many people who had followed the king's journey from the beginning began demanding greater transparency. Supporters wanted reassurance. Critics wanted clarity. Commentators debated what information should be shared and what should remain private. The monarchy found itself caught between two competing realities: the need to protect personal medical matters and the public's desire for honest answers about the condition of its sovereign. With every passing day, the pressure intensified. The rumors became louder. The questions became harder to avoid. What had once been viewed as speculation now felt impossible to dismiss. The atmosphere surrounding the monarchy had changed fundamentally, and many feared that even more significant developments could be waiting just beyond the horizon. The sense of uncertainty was no longer confined to palace corridors. It had become a national conversation, one that demanded answers and showed no sign of fading. Faced with mounting pressure and endless speculation, a moment arrived when silence was no longer an option. For months, Queen Camilla had stood firmly beside the king while revealing very little. But now, with concern reaching unprecedented levels, she made a decision that would send shockwaves through royal watchers around the world. The pressure had been building for months. Every unanswered question, every carefully worded palace statement, and every new rumor had added another layer of uncertainty to an already tense situation. As speculation surrounding King Charles's health continued to grow, many believed the royal family would maintain its strategy of caution and silence. That expectation, however, would soon be shattered. After months of standing beside the king while offering only limited public insight, Queen Camilla found herself facing a moment that could no longer be avoided. The questions had become too numerous. The concern had become too widespread, and the demand for clarity had reached a level that even the palace could no longer ignore. When Camilla finally addressed the situation, the reaction was immediate. Royal watchers, commentators, and supporters across Britain listened carefully, knowing that every word carried enormous significance. Her acknowledgement did not reveal every detail, nor did it answer every question. Yet what made the moment so powerful was its honesty. For the first time in a long time, there was a direct recognition that the king's health battle remained serious. The carefully maintained wall of uncertainty had cracked, and through that opening came confirmation of what many had feared for months. The impact of that acknowledgement extended far beyond royal circles. For countless supporters who had followed the king's journey, the news triggered a deeply emotional response. Many had hoped that the reduced appearances, scheduling adjustments, and increased secrecy were merely precautionary measures. They wanted reassurance that the situation was improving. Instead, Camilla's words reinforced the reality that this remained an ongoing struggle, one marked by challenges that had not yet been overcome. Sympathy poured in from across the country. Messages of support multiplied. The public reaction reflected not only concern for the monarch, but also admiration for the resilience he continued to demonstrate in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, Britain's media responded with intense interest. News programs, newspapers, and commentators immediately began analyzing the significance of Camilla's statement. Some viewed it as a carefully measured effort to provide transparency. Others saw it as evidence that circumstances behind palace walls had become too serious to conceal through silence alone. Regardless of interpretation, one fact was undeniable. The conversation surrounding the king's health had entered an entirely new phase. What had once been driven largely by speculation was now being shaped by direct acknowledgement from one of the individuals closest to him. For Camilla personally, the moment carried enormous emotional weight. Addressing the issue publicly meant confronting realities she had spent months navigating privately. It meant balancing honesty with responsibility. It meant reassuring the nation while continuing to support a husband facing one of the greatest challenges of his life. The decision was not merely a public relations exercise. It was a reflection of the extraordinary circumstances confronting the royal family. In many ways, her willingness to speak demonstrated just how dramatically the situation had evolved. At the same time, palace officials worked carefully to ensure that the message achieved its intended purpose. While acknowledging the seriousness of the king's condition, they also sought to reassure the public that the monarchy remained stable. The institution had weathered crises before. It had faced uncertainty, loss, and transition throughout its long history. The goal was not to create alarm, but to provide enough transparency to restore confidence. Yet striking that balance proved extraordinarily difficult. Every reassurance generated new questions. Every clarification encouraged further scrutiny. As the public absorbed Camilla's words, a profound shift occurred in the national conversation. The focus was no longer solely on rumors or hidden developments. Attention now turned toward the broader implications of what had been confirmed. If the king's battle remained serious, despite months of treatment and determination, what did that mean for the future? What preparations might already be underway? And how could the monarchy navigate the uncertain road ahead? Yet the confirmation raised an even larger question. What could this mean for the future of the monarchy itself? The king's health battle was no longer just a personal struggle. It had become a defining challenge for the institution he had spent a lifetime preparing to lead. Following Queen Camilla's public acknowledgement, the conversation surrounding King Charles's condition changed dramatically. What had once been viewed primarily as a private medical battle now carried far broader implications. The focus was no longer limited to treatments, consultations, or recovery timelines. Instead, attention shifted toward the monarchy itself. Questions that many had previously considered premature suddenly moved to the center of public discussion. The future of the crown, the continuity of leadership, and the long-term stability of the institution became subjects of intense interest both inside Britain and beyond its borders. For decades, Charles had prepared for the responsibilities of kingship. His journey to the throne was one of the longest in royal history. He spent years studying the role, supporting countless causes, and preparing for the moment when he would ultimately lead the monarchy. Yet now, at a time when he had finally assumed that responsibility, he found himself confronting an entirely different challenge. The struggle was no longer about preparation. It was about endurance. It was about fulfilling the demands of kingship while facing a health battle that continued to cast uncertainty over the future. As those concerns grew, Prince William's position within the royal family became increasingly significant. The adjustments that observers had noticed months earlier suddenly carried new meaning. His expanded responsibilities, his growing visibility, and his increasingly central role in major royal matters appeared less like routine developments and more like part of a broader effort to ensure continuity. Supporters viewed his presence as reassuring. They saw a future king stepping forward during a difficult period. Yet the growing attention surrounding William also reflected a deeper reality. The public was beginning to think seriously about what the next chapter of the monarchy might look like. Questions surrounding succession inevitably followed. While constitutional processes remain clear, public emotions rarely follow simple rules. Many people found themselves wrestling with conflicting feelings. There was concern for King Charles and hope for his recovery. At the same time, there was growing curiosity about how the monarchy would adapt if circumstances required further adjustments. Discussions that once seemed distant suddenly felt immediate. Every appearance by William attracted increased scrutiny. Every royal engagement generated fresh speculation. The future was no longer an abstract concept. It felt closer than ever. Adding to the intensity were comparisons to previous moments of royal uncertainty. Throughout history, the monarchy has faced crises, transitions, and periods of profound change. Each generation has confronted challenges that tested its resilience. Observers began drawing parallels to those earlier chapters, searching for lessons and reassurance. Yet many also recognize that every era is different. Every monarch faces unique circumstances, and every challenge leaves its own mark on history. The uncertainty surrounding Charles carried a distinctly modern dimension, amplified by constant media attention and the public's unprecedented access to information. Despite the growing concern, one priority remained clear within royal circles: maintaining stability. Senior members of the family continued fulfilling their duties. Public engagements proceeded. Official responsibilities remained in motion. Behind every decision was a determination to preserve confidence in the institution during a period of uncertainty. The monarchy understood that moments like these are not judged solely by outcomes. They are judged by how leaders respond when tested by adversity. For the public, however, the emotional impact extended beyond constitutional questions. Many people had watched Charles's journey for decades. They had witnessed his years as Prince of Wales, his transition to the throne, and his efforts to define his reign. Seeing him face such a significant personal battle created a powerful emotional response. Sympathy mixed with uncertainty, respect mixed with concern. The king's struggle had become more than a royal story. It had become a human story, one that resonated far beyond palace walls. Yet, even as the nation reflected on the challenges of the present, attention increasingly began turning towards something larger. Beyond the questions, beyond the speculation, and beyond the uncertainty surrounding the future, lay another issue that could not be ignored: the legacy King Charles hoped to leave behind, regardless of what challenges remained ahead. As the monarchy confronted an uncertain road ahead, attention turned to the legacy King Charles hoped to leave behind. Health battles may test even the strongest leaders, but they also reveal something deeper: character, resilience, and the legacy that remains when the headlines eventually fade. As conversations about King Charles's health continued to dominate public attention, another realization slowly began to emerge. Beyond the medical updates, beyond the speculation, and beyond the uncertainty surrounding the future, there was a larger story taking shape. It was the story of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for service, only to find himself confronting one of the most difficult personal challenges imaginable, during the very period he had waited decades to reach. In many ways, the king's health battle became more than a test of endurance. It became a defining chapter in the story of his reign. For years, Charles dedicated himself to causes he believed could make a difference. Long before ascending the throne, he championed environmental issues, supported charitable organizations, and worked to modernize aspects of royal life while preserving traditions that had endured for generations. Supporters often pointed to his commitment to duty, while critics debated his approach to change. Yet regardless of differing opinions, few could deny the persistence that defined his public life. That same persistence now appeared to be guiding him through a deeply personal struggle, one that demanded strength not only from him but from those closest to him as well. Among those standing beside him throughout this difficult period was Queen Camilla. The months of uncertainty had revealed a partnership tested by extraordinary circumstances. While much public attention focused on the king's condition, Camilla remained a constant presence, navigating responsibilities, managing expectations, and providing support during moments few outsiders could fully understand. Her role became increasingly important as challenges intensified. Together, they faced a reality neither could control, relying on resilience and determination to navigate a situation that continued to evolve. The wider royal family also found itself united by a common purpose. Prince William, Catherine, Princess Anne, and other senior royals continued carrying out their responsibilities, while supporting both the king and the institution he represented. Their efforts reflected a principle that has defined the monarchy throughout its history: continuity. Generations of royals have faced periods of uncertainty, loss, and transition. The strength of the institution has often rested not on avoiding hardship, but on enduring it. That lesson appeared more relevant than ever as the family confronted the challenges unfolding before them. Beyond palace walls, the public response revealed a remarkable level of sympathy and reflection. Many people who had followed Charles's journey for decades found themselves reconsidering the human side of a figure often viewed primarily through the lens of duty and tradition. His struggle reminded people that titles and responsibilities do not shield anyone from life's difficulties. In that sense, the king's battle created an unusual connection between monarch and nation. It became a shared experience marked by concern, hope, and a desire to see him overcome the obstacles before him. At the heart of these conversations was the enduring importance of duty. Throughout the uncertainty, the monarchy continued functioning. Responsibilities were fulfilled. Commitments were honored. The institution moved forward while adapting to changing circumstances. This balance between continuity and change has always been central to the monarchy's survival. It is what allows it to endure periods of crisis while maintaining public confidence. And it is what many believe will help guide the institution through whatever challenges may still lie ahead. Yet despite the concern, uncertainty, and emotional strain of recent months, there remained reason for hope. The future was not fully written. Questions remained unanswered. Developments could still reshape the path ahead in unexpected ways. What remained clear, however, was the determination of those involved to face the challenge with courage and resolve. Whether measured through personal resilience, family support, or institutional stability, the story was no longer defined solely by hardship. It was also defined by perseverance. And while many questions remain unanswered, one thing has become impossible to ignore. The outcome of this battle may shape the royal family for generations to come. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.